Scouting for Girls, This Ain't a Love Song. Now, if you were listening an hour ago, you would have heard two financial experts hoping for very different things from Mr. Darling's budget. Jonathan Davis wanted cuts now. Richard Murphy felt we could delay tackling the deficit. They've been listening outside the studio. They come back in to talk about it. Jonathan, are you disappointed, worried, happy? No, you're not happy, are you?
I'm not at all surprised, I think, is the answer. It's an inflationary budget, ultimately. He's just continuing more of the same. He talks about every economy is recovering, the global economy is recovering, and then he starts to list the European economies which are still in recession. And the big thing is, they talk about as if they can forecast accurately. Not one of them forecasts the biggest bust in history.
Richard?
Well, this has been a litany of all that has worked, let's be totally honest, and it has worked. You know, we have got lower borrowing than was expected. We have lower unemployment than was expected. This was not forecast because the banks collapsed, and Alistair Darling was quite right to emphasise the importance of now regulating banks in this post-recession period. We have to act with others. And what is extraordinary about what has happened is that every single G20 country has agreed that this is the right policy.
But Jonathan has pointed out to an important principle, which is just that people can all be wrong. So the fact that everyone else is doing it doesn't mean it's right. Just help us on this debt to understand it, Richard. Are you bothered by the fact that the country is borrowing about 465 million quid a day?
No. The reason is quite simple. We can afford to pay the interest on it. In fact, that interest cost is lower than we were expecting. It is going to be a lower part of future cost than we expected because the borrowing is smaller. There is no considerable burden from that. The overall level of income will be 75% of our gross national income. Now, listeners to this programme will be well aware that they're borrowing 3 and 4 times their earnings to pay for their houses. We're talking about 3/4 of our earnings on this deficit. It is completely affordable in historic terms. It's low, and Alistair Darling is right. This is the lowest in the G7. We are completely under control, and the markets haven't moved. They're quite relaxed about
Jonathan,
this.
is that right? We've got too worked up about this debt?
It's so under control. Our currency has plummeted by about a third over the last year. It is the case that he's forecasting reduced borrowings over the next few years. Incidentally, it's still £571 billion that we're going to be adding on to the government debt. And it is the case that in those numbers we can pay the interest. The problem is, there's no discussion yet that because it's inflationary, the global financiers, they will raise our interest rates. Whatever the Bank of England does, whoever's the Chancellor in the future, they will raise our rates. The amount we'll pay in interest going forward in the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years will be a multiple of what is currently being forecast.
This is not an inflationary budget. The target is 2%, historically an incredibly low rate, a rate that we need. We can't risk deflation. But let's come back to the important point about exchange rates and so on. There has been no movement in the markets. There's no evidence otherwise. This morning, the fact it's fallen by a third over the last year is great news for the UK economy. Quite simply, we've priced ourselves back into work. That is what people want in this country. Let's not get worried about financiers.
The pound falling is good, you think?
The pound falling has been good news for us.
Because our debt is in pounds, so I guess if the pound falls, the debt falls. Is that right?
There's not just that. The important point is if the pound falls, our exports are relatively cheaper, so people can buy our products, which keeps us in work, which makes us more competitive, which means that people in this country will be working when people elsewhere will not be. Let's talk about real people on the ground here. Let's ignore this obsession with bankers and finance and all of that. People working is what matters. Well, they're our wealth.
Let's talk about real people and how what was in the budget will affect them. And I suppose that the house price thing, first of all, stopping stamp duty, cancelling all stamp duty on purchases under £250,000. Jonathan Davis, good idea?
For the very short term, it will win some votes, and that's what the point of the budget is. It's a political statement. People, again, will be sucked into an asset class where they will borrow beyond belief. And yes, it will support the housing market in the very short term, but unemployment will rise. Interest rates will rise. Public sector spending will be cut. Credit will be continued to be restricted. The house price crash continues. It started in September 2007. It's had a temporary reprieve because of government borrowings. We are still mistaking debt for prosperity.
because house prices went up in 2009, which no expert predicted anywhere. They went up.
And no expert expected us to borrow practically £200 billion and put it into the economy.
So we are, Richard, we're printing money. They do that in Zimbabwe, we're doing it here. And the effect of that is, Jonathan says, catastrophic in the long term.
But where's the evidence that that is true? We have printed money. We needed to print money. We have, as a result, got people in work. We have, as a result, got higher than expected government revenues. We are still a functioning economy. If we'd done what Jonathan is talking about here, we would have up to 4, maybe more million people unemployed now. Our benefits costs would be enormous. Our tax revenues would have fallen through the floor. We wouldn't have the capacity to pay for anything. We would be in deep poverty. There would be massively more unemployed. Jonathan's analysis is just completely wrong. He's offering you the analysis of the shopkeeper. What we heard was Alistair Darling offer you the analysis of the Chancellor, and they're fundamentally different.
Jonathan, there seems to be a consensus now that spending at the bottom by the government was crucial to tide us over and get us out of the danger of depression. And at least he can say that.
And I would say to you, cutting spending at the top is what they should have done.
But that's too late for that. What you mean in 2006-07?
Absolutely.
Well, you probably all agree on that.
Well,
that didn't happen.
I was in the minority at that time saying that's what should happen.
But you would say spend at the bottom, would you now or not?
I would say cut spending right now because that will strengthen our currency. It is simply not the case that we benefit from a weakening currency because we are not significantly an exporting country. Our economy is based on buying and selling houses. It's based on CDOs and CDSs, mortgage-backed securities. We are a city-based economy. We are not an exporting economy. I'll tell you what, I wish we had German manufacturing might rather than our swashbuckling city.
Let me give you some comments from listeners. Margaret James is in Salisbury. Hi to you, Margaret. She says, I've got a small business. I've had it for 23 years, so I am well placed to deal with the recession. However, the experience of my close friends is that the banks are doing absolutely nothing to help small businesses. The government really needs to enforce bank lending. Lee texts from London. I'm a tax inspector and a member of the Public and Commercial Services Union. I'm on strike today because the government is trying to change our terms and conditions. No savage cuts are needed. I earn at least $15,000 a year less than my opposite numbers in the private sector. Jill in Wales texts, I am fuming. My son moves into his first house next Saturday. He paid 1,600 quid in stamp duty. We're having a lot, and this was just last week, a lot of people saying, can they get a refund? Can they say, no? You're shaking your head, both of you. No chance.
No way.
But it's just life. Life's not fair.
It's unfair.
If you bought a house for less than $250,000 in the last 6 months, it's just a bad one. I'm sorry.
Can I, however, say something that this will actually increase the value of their houses? So, by and large, stamp duty cuts actually increase the value of the house that somebody's just bought because people have got £1,600 more to spend when they're coming into the market now.
And what does it do at the top end out of interest when they 4 to 5% or whatever?
Well, hopefully it will deflate some of their house prices at the top end.
Drew Myerscough in Preston says, I think they should cut now. They need to cut benefits, not just for people here, but to people abroad. Rather than put up my taxes, they should take money off people who haven't given to the system, like health tourists using the NHS and people on benefits who get free prescriptions. We are discussing Alistair Darling's budget. It's Radio 2 with In Excess.
Everybody does, yeah, that's okay, yeah. So slide over here and give me a moment. Your moves are so raw. I've got to let you know. I've got to let you know. You're my kind. I need you tonight. I'm not sleeping. There's something about you, girl, that makes me sweat. I'm lonely. Can't take it all. something about you, girl. It makes me sweat. I'm lonely. Can't take it all. Gonna live my life. I'm lonely. Can't take it all. Gonna live my life. So slide over here and give me a moment. Your moves are so raw. I've got to let you know. I've got to let you know. So slide over here and give me a moment. I've got to let you know. I've got to let you know. You wanna my kind.
In excess on Radio 2, 10 to 2, and it's the Jeremy Vine Show. A little bit unusual programme today because we had a lot of Alistair Darling there, and we have our two experts in. I always feel I shouldn't describe anyone as an expert because it's not helpful, but Richard Murphy is Director of Tax Research UK. He thinks everything's okay. Jonathan Davis is economist and investment advisor, and you are deeply worried, Jonathan, about really everything.
Medium long term, I see eventually when we get through this deflationary period, deflation in assets and wealth, I see rising and rising inflation inexorably. I see 1970s style inflation by the end of this decade. Look at the 1960s when we had 3.5% inflation. In the mid-60s, by the mid-70s we had 25% inflation. Alongside that, we had nearly 20% interest rates. That's what I see happening.
We're such a different world now. We're in a globalised world.
Yeah, there's more and more debt. Exactly. There's vastly more debt. And that's why the significant increase in interest rates over the next several years, not from the Bank of England, but from the global financiers, is going to bring down our economy, just like Japan for the last 20 years.
I thought you mentioned Japan. Japan is the worry, isn't it, Richard? Because in Japan, they had this happen. They had a crash in 1989. The government sprayed the economy with money to try and get it going. And it just slowed and slowed and slowed. And 20 years later, they're still in it.
Well, they're static. They haven't grown the way that others have. But that's absolutely true.
The property's down 75%.
Well, so what? Actually, if property's down 75%, wouldn't a lot of us be able to afford to live better because we wouldn't be spending so much on actually our mortgages, our rent and everything else, and our quality of life might be improved as a result? After all, most of us are wage slaves for mortgages. Mortgage means grip of death.
Yeah, but if
That's
you're a
what it
wage
is.
slave for a mortgage and your property then falls, you're not a happy person.
If the value of properties falls, then we will find that inflation will actually wipe out the debt as well. Jonathan's scenario was quite absurd, because actually if we go back to the 1970s, and I don't believe his scenario will happen for a moment, but if we do, the people who lived through that period are now the wealthiest in this country. They're the baby boomers who benefited from the rise in property values, which actually resulted from that inflation, with their mortgages written off by inflation. So let's not cry about this. His analysis is wrong, but even if it was right, the outcome would be actually a transfer of wealth to the young people, your children, Jeremy, who you worry about, who actually would benefit from that over the long term.
Kat in Edinburgh has emailed to say, I think stamp duty being scrapped for homes below 250,000 is great. My husband and I are hoping to buy our own home in the next few years. We were worrying how we would have been able to afford it. Maybe unfair on those who just paid their stamp duty, but it helps a young family of 5 buy their first home. Jonathan, you don't think it does, do you?
In the short term, of course it does. The problem is, of course, as Richard quite rightly said, it will raise house prices in the short term. But long term, I go back to the wider economy. I see rising inflation, rising interest rates. I see falling public sector spending. I see rising unemployment, and I see falling credit, in other words, rising credit restriction. This is not conducive to long-term rise in house prices.
Andrea in Brent, I know you want to get back in, Richard. Go on.
I see long-term employment, I see long-term wealth generation, I see people in this country, the real source of our wealth, in jobs, doing what they're best at, and they will pay the tax to repay that debt. Let's not panic about that. Only financiers are worried. Let's ignore financiers. They got us into this mess. Let's not listen to them now when they're trying to get us out of it, or actually into deeper recession, which suits them very well indeed, but not us.
Two diametrically opposed speakers here. I hope, if you're listening at home or in the car, I hope you can choose which one you agree with. I don't know if you can go right down the middle. I don't know if that's possible. Andrea in Brentwood emails, I work for a local authority, here we are, as a play and open spaces development manager. We cannot sustain services with more cuts. Grass verges won't be cut as often, and bins won't be emptied. No strategic planners would mean that builders would get away with murder. In the public sector, everyone is arguing for their job as being vital at the moment.
Well, of course they are.
Yeah.
They would, wouldn't they?
They just advertised for a lift attendant in the House of Commons, apparently.
Yeah, because obviously MPs can't walk up 2 flights of stairs.
Phil Briggs emails and says, I've just heard the Chancellor is increasing the duty on cider by 10%, and then he smugly tries to convince everyone he's trying to help small businesses. Well, I make cider on a small scale. I'm a small business. I was looking to increase the business. I will now have to think again. This has got nothing to do with antisocial behaviour. It's people who are antisocial. It's not cider. Cider is not antisocial. He says, please vote these idiots out. Are we at the end of this? No, we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to play some music. Richard, you want to say something?
No, you play some music for a minute, Jim. Go on, I'll give you a break.
Oh, great. When you say that, I'm not ready. Okay, let's have... Do we want Simon and Garfunkel? How about that? Let's do that. Cecilia, Simon and Garfunkel is Budget Day. We've heard 3p fuel duty rise will be phased in. Duty on cider up 10%. Stamp duty scrap for homes below $250,000 but raised to 5% if your house, the one you're buying, is over $1 million. UK economy, broad picture, it's contracted 6% during the recession, and that is why the government is borrowing a lot, although a little bit less than it expected, something like £167 billion in 2009-10, a lot of money. So, experts, do you cut spending or raise taxes? Jonathan, which do you do?
I believe that they have to cut spending. They clearly have decided not to. Darling stood up and basically said, "Dear Mr. Speaker, I come to get re-elected." That was not a long-termist approach. It was very much a short-termist approach.
Richard, do you have to cut spending, raise taxes, both?
Well, he has announced some small spending cuts. He has said he's going for growth. That is fundamental. We could raise taxes on the wealthiest in our economy, and in a small way we have. But the important point is keep going as we are until unemployment is coming down, real people are at work generating the tax revenues we need, and then we do have to cut spending. I agree. But that's several years away yet.
listener Andrew Osborne emails, and he says the public sector wanted equal pay, so they should get equal unemployment. The government has given us a fantasy economy. We've got to cut spending back to the bare minimum. The government does not deliver real wealth or growth. It has to come from taxes which reduce growth and wealth. Leave the money in the real wealth creators' pockets. That's those who make and build things, so they can innovate us out of this mess, or we are going to be bankrupt. Check out the forgotten recession of 1920 to 21 as proof. We might look that one up. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in and giving us your slightly different views on the economy in the light of Alistair Darling's budget speech. It was Richard Murphy, Director of Tax Research UK, and Jonathan Davis, Economist and Investment Advisor. Coming up next, Steve Wright in the afternoon has with him the ice skating medic, Dr. Hillary.